From the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia, to around the globe. You're listening to Shark Bite Biz, your exclusive place for business strategy, sales, marketing, and tech in the roaring 20s. And now, here's your host, David Strausser.
I'm your fabulous host, David Strausser, and it's time for another incredible episode of Shark Bite Biz, your place to learn how to grow a business during complete chaos. You all know the storyline by now. Each and every week I come in and pretty much the first words I say is, I got an amazing show for you all today. Well, guess what? Today, I got a superb show for you all today. Why? Well, because I do. It's just one of my favorite types of episodes where I really get to mix business and pleasure. I guess you could kind of say my pleasure is business, yeah? So, all the fans out there, though, you all know, everybody that's watched the show, I love tech. I'm a huge techie. I live on the edge of bleeding edge tech, whether it's cloud gaming with Google Stadia or now Amazon Luna, or maybe it's mobile devices, networks. I have my own cloud server here in the house. I just love shiny new tech things that maybe they have perfect vision with the product launch or the service launch, but in reality, when you actually get down to use them, they fall a little bit short and they're probably just as imperfect as I am. It's kind of like my beloved Philadelphia Eagles, you know? They look good on paper, but as the season played out, whew, not so good. Well, with all the big news that we've had this past year or so, with 5G being in the headlines, mostly around some crazy theories out there, and also with Elon Musk, Starlink, grabbing, more and more headlines every couple months as that service keeps improving. And who can really forget about T-Mobile and Sprint merging to finally give AT&T and Verizon some real competition? I felt right now was probably the best time that we could really just have a good conversation about what is going on in the wireless industry. Data is ever so important in our reality. Work from home, virtual schooling. It's really crazy how much data we are consuming right now during the pandemic. And, I've got to give a shout out. This is a bad shout out, but I've got to give a shout out to Comcast, because in the middle of all this that we have going on, everybody's favorite corporation, Comcast, has just announced that anybody who is not on their unlimited plan is now locked in at 1.2 terabytes per month for their data usage. If you go over that, you are going to get overage charges. This is insane. This is the wrong time to be launching a data cap. There is no reason why Comcast needs to enforce that. No logical business reason, and fattening the wallet of their shareholders is no longer acceptable in 2020. I don't think this is good for us at all, especially if you think about it, because most places actually have just a monopoly or a duopoly or a triopoly for their internet service. It is very, very limited. Now, hear me out. Am I saying that I think everybody should have free internet? No. Everybody should pay for internet, but when you are talking about broadband, you're talking about a physical tethered connection to your house. Probably fiber optics, but whatever it is, it's high-end broadband, okay? That should be unlimited if you're on tiered plans. I mean, maybe if you're going with a bottom line cheap plan that's just basic service, opt into something cheaper, data cap, okay, I'm all for that. But for most people, with how much they have to pay and the limited choice that they have, there should be no data caps whatsoever. I think this is so regressive and against what we need as a country with this pandemic going on. I don't know what they're thinking. It's pretty crazy, but whatever. Okay, let's get back to today's guest because we have an awesome guest today. Good friend of mine. His name is Hugh Odom. Hugh Odom is a former AT&T attorney for over 11 years and the founder and president of Vertical Consultants, a telecom consulting firm that has provided consulting advice for companies like Walmart, Disney, governmental institutions like the United States Postal Services, New York Housing Authority, Veterans Affairs, the City of Atlanta, and the City of Charlotte. You can share the evolving story of how the telecom industry, both service infrastructure and cell site locations, has and will become more crucial based upon the COVID-19 pandemic and the quote-unquote new normal that will result after COVID-19 has run its course. As the founder and president of Vertical Consultants, Hugh wants to demystify not only what is being reported in the news, but what is going on behind the scenes inside companies like AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile. So without further ado, let's bring Hugh on in here.
Business operations.
Hugh, welcome to Shark Bite Biz. So glad to have you here today.
Thanks for the opportunity to be part of your program. We really welcome the opportunity.
Oh, no problem. I'm really excited about this episode because I'm big into tech, bleeding edge tech, and your work in the mobile industry has me really excited. So I know who you are, but why don't you tell all our viewers out there on YouTube, on Spotify, iTunes, out there listening, who is Hugh?
My name is Hugh Odom. I'm the president and founder of a company called Vertical Consultants. We've been in business for about 10 years now. My background is being a real estate and telecom attorney for over 20 years. I was an attorney inside AT&T for almost 11 years. And we work with property owners all throughout the United States, from individuals to churches, schools, municipalities, all the way up to we've been provided counsel for companies like Walmart, Disney, City of Atlanta, New York Housing Authority, all across the board. We work with them to help negotiate new cell site leases and also renegotiate and restructure existing ones. Our focus is to try to get the best economics for our customers, our clients, in those agreements, and also protect them with regards to their overall properties.
Wow, that's great. And this day and age, being mobile, global pandemic, all this stuff, I mean, having cell tower sites is probably pretty important, I'd say.
Yeah, it's become, it's the backbone. I tell people, besides food, water, and air, the thing you rely upon most every day is communication. And that communication is usually through a mobile device that you're holding on to. And so the backbone, the ability for people to provide that communication from one person to another in different means is those cell towers, are those cell sites. You can have the most sophisticated technology on your phone, all these apps that you can download, all this information you can have access to. If that cell tower is not working, it's like having a car with no gasoline in the tank. It doesn't go anywhere.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think everybody's experienced a dead spot here or there, so I think
Yes,
they know exactly.
Yes, and it's amazing how freaked out we become. We can't get to work. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I remember. I lost service. I love my Galaxy S20 5G Ultra plus whatever it's called now. But
Right.
I remember, like, as soon as I can't get service, it's like, oh man, here I'm at Twitter. It's Philadelphia, cell service down, and it freaks you out. It's definitely, it gives you that uncomfortable feeling,
It is. It's like when the power goes off. It's okay for a few minutes, but then you go, how long is it going to stay dark? And that's really what it is. You start becoming a darkness because we're so ingrained to have this ability to have communication and be able to access data. And when that goes away, we're in the dark for most of us.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially with such a data present society. I mean, everything that we do right now revolves around data in some sort. I mean, you need some level of connectivity. Personally, I find myself making phone calls less and less. I mean, it's VoIP calls, or it is a Zoom chat like we're doing right now, or some other connectivity to where if the phone service goes down, I could live without that much longer than I could if the internet went down.
Sure. I mean, our wireless devices really, I kid people that, you go get a new phone and you don't ask them how the phone works. You ask them how everything else works. And that's really,
Right.
we become dependent upon it, not for a phone call, but everything else that is provided through that little mobile device.
Right. So let's get into the first big topic I have for you. I wanted to chew on this one first, which is the 5G rollout, because I don't get it, but 5G has got bad press out there. A lot of weird people thinking weird things. I think, is there any truth to the rumors? I think to me, it's just like 4G. It's the further evolving of 4G LTE. Should people be fearful of 5G?
No, they shouldn't be fearful of 5G. 5G is basically, think of it this way. It's the same car. You're just switching out the engine. It gets you there a lot quicker. It provides you a lot better performance. You can handle the road a lot better, things of that nature. It's not something people should fear. It's something that people should embrace. It's going to make life a lot different for a lot of people as time goes on. For a lot of not only people in urban areas, but the big thing is 5G rolls out across the country, as we've kind of come to know in the last few months with COVID, that we need access to internet and things of that nature a lot more than we did at the start of this year, because of different ways we work and how we school our children and how we do even health visits now over the internet. That 5G will speed those things up, make those things more reliable, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I really think that it's going to really change how we communicate. I mean, I know we'll talk more about T-Mobile and stuff like that later, but I'm from a small city originally in Pennsylvania called Pottsville, maybe about 20,000 people or so. And now, for the first time in probably a couple decades, they actually have a new option for high-speed internet. And that's because with T-Mobile, they've enabled the 5G for basically broadband at home. And I think that's pretty awesome.
Well, with all the rollout of 5G, what's happening is it's twofold. What people see on the commercials is they're seeing the cell tower upgrades and all these build out new cell towers, but you're also having all the fiber optic network under the ground, et cetera, being built out. And that allows it a lot of tie-in for homes and other businesses at times that fiber optic network is being laid out as part of the 5G network. So what we're doing out there, what's being happening out there is you're building more and more infrastructure. When you build more and more infrastructure, it's kind of like going and driving on your highway, and you have a 4-lane highway, and then it becomes a 6-lane highway. What happens? Right. You got a lot less traffic, right? So that's what this infrastructure is. You're just making that highway a lot wider, a lot more available for more cars to travel. And when you have more room, you can travel at higher speeds as well.
How big is that difference between like 4G LTE versus 5G? I mean, is that a proper like analogy that you just gave, where it's 4-lane to 6-lane, or do you think it's much wider than that?
Well, there's many points, but there are two big points. You're talking about speed, and right now we're in the initial stages of building out the 5G network. So we're talking about when it gets rolled out completely, you're talking up to 100 times faster, okay, than it is right now. That's number one. Somewhat related to that is latency. So latency is like, think of pushing a button. You push a button, you have this little bit of delay. That's the latency. What happens is that latency gets diminished drastically. So that's where you talk about have self-driving cars, self-operating equipment, because you can have that latency point narrow tremendously. So that allows you that. So you get speedier movement of data, but you also get a diminishment of latency So those are the big two things. So you're going up when it all gets rolled out. The predictions are somewhere close to 100 times faster and a tremendous diminishment in latency time between once you push the button and it actually reacts.
Right. And the capacity as far as how many connected devices can be
Sure.
on that is drastically increased as well too, right?
It is. It is. It's dependent. That varies a little bit based upon how the network is laid out. But yes, you can. So you're going to have the ability to basically think of it having more outlets in the wall. You can plug in more
Right.
devices. That's basically the other part of it, connectivity.
Okay, that makes sense. So one of the topics that you just talked on was about, COVID, telemedicine, stuff like that. An interesting story I saw maybe a couple of weeks ago, I think it was with the fires that were out west, where people were using Starlink, for example, for fighting the fires out there, the first responders in the fires, they were using Starlink. I mean, that sounds like a perfect situation for, mobile infrastructure with 5G to be, if it was out there capable at the time, that it could have really fit those needs during an emergency situation, right?
Well, the biggest thing that's a good example. But the biggest thing right now is we've gone from an understanding that most people thought, years ago, especially that mobile service was a kind of a privilege, not a necessity. Now it's become a necessity, and where that's really kind of overflowed is into not in the urban areas but more rural areas. So you start getting
Right.
out and you start moving that out with things like emergency services, schooling, things of that nature. So you have this
Oh
big
yeah.
disparity. Let's say a school in the middle of a rural area versus a school in the middle. You talked about Pennsylvania. You remember Pottsville versus Philadelphia. Well,
Oh
kid,
yeah.
or even where I am, I'm in the Nashville, Tennessee area, and we have Nashville's a pretty good sized town, but we have areas where you have school systems that overlap, where you have kids that are in areas that are more rural, but they're in the same school system as some kids in a more urban area. So they have
Right.
access to wireless services while same kids in the same school don't. So this is where this is going to be. I think what's going to happen is you're going to see a lot of mandates by the federal government for these larger companies, AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, et cetera, to in their build outs, not to only be focused on areas that are profitable for them, but also areas that need to be built out for necessity to provide these services, like you were mentioning, for certain emergency services for fires and other things.
Yeah, and I think that that's a great thing because I can say right now, for example, our smart home has probably grown enormously since we've been living here. And then you add into that, now I have all the kids' devices. They're doing the virtual learning. I mean, even with having fiber optic connection here, I mean, I probably have throughout the course of a day like 100 plus devices connected to our Wi-Fi system. Thank God I have a Orbi Wi-Fi 6 router, so it's able to handle everything. But if I was out in a more rural section where I wasn't able to get that, the gig connection that I have, that bandwidth, I don't think that would be possible. I think my ability to adopt bleeding edge tech would be severely limited.
Sure, and that's where we're getting into a point where there's this exponential growth in data usage, and that's from all these different devices connected, but all the different services. So what's happening in the industry is telecom is going to some of these service providers. When I'm talking about service providers, think of like
Mhm.
Spotify, Netflix,
Right.
all these things. What's happening is you have all this data transferring one way, and you have to handle it like that interstate highway. And what they're doing is the AT&T, Verizon of the world are going to them and working with the Netflix, Spotify companies and saying, look, let's work to try to reduce the amount of data that you have to transfer. So they're working on both ends, increase the lanes for the highway I mentioned, but also make the cars smaller as well. So if they can reduce the data being transferred and also increase the width of the bandwidth, it works both
Right.
ends. That's what's going on in the industry.
I think that's pretty awesome. Then it's kind of, I don't know if it was coincidentally or what, but it seems like 5G and COVID are crossing at the right time, because I often think, like, where would we be right now if this pandemic happened 5, 10, 15 years ago? I think most of us would be bored out of our minds. I mean, thank God that we have the wireless service we do, the fiber optics and stuff that we do, because it's really opened up, it gave us something to be able to, pass our time away with.
Well, it's not only that, which is very important because boredom leads to other things which cause problems.
Oh,
But
yeah.
you get into what we kind of mentioned before. You get into how would we of 10 years ago handle schooling our children during this period of
Hmm.
time with regards to virtual learning? How would we have handled telehealth services with regards to those things, to be able to have, especially seniors, being able to reach out to their doctors and being able to have some communication with them? So this is
Right.
something that eventually we're moving into a different world with regard to how we interact as a society, but also how we interact with services that we usually have in our lives from day to day to more business wise. So this is something that you're right. It crossed at a very interesting point in time, and I think it put a more of a shining light on the necessity for some of these things.
Yeah, and it's kind of cool because it just all converged at once. And I don't know. I mean, telehealth, I cannot speak today. Telehealth has been around for years, okay?
Right.
You have Zoom, Microsoft Teams, a lot of these services that we're fully embracing have been around. But it wasn't until the pandemic that it was like they really got spotlighted and pushed further. And now they went from nobody 6 months ago to a daily part of our lives, or telehealth. I mean, I'm doing essentially all of my appointments via telehealth on my T-Mobile network service. Whereas a year ago from now, no, I didn't have any. None of my providers would even allow me to do telehealth with them. It had to be in-person office visit. So it's really awesome how everybody kind of had to adopt with the situation, pivot, realize what it was, and then they embrace the technology with pretty much open arms so that we could all move together, at the same time with this situation.
Well, what I kind of look at it is I agree with you 100%, is that what's happening is you have the generational gap. And what we see is a
Hmm.
lot of generational, let's say 50 or above, were hesitant about using certain services that were internet based, mobile based, because they were unfamiliar with it. Number one, they thought issues with it with regards to privacy and things of that nature. Now they're probably being forced into it, not only from a private enterprise of them using it privately, but a business enterprise as well. So you had a lot of, I mean, I come from the legal background of having to go into an
Yeah.
office and things that now that, and you had to go into the office, you had to be there to do your work. Well, now people are realizing there's a way to get things done, and you don't have to go to a physical brick and mortar kind of building to actually do
Right.
the work there. And we live in a lot larger global market with regards to being able to do transactions and never see the person. And so that's kind of forcing a certain generation, I'll call it 50 and above, to be forced into adapting, whereas the younger generation X and millennials had already adapted, understood this, and that was going to
Hmm.
transition anyway.
Right. No, I absolutely agree with you. So I've got to ask you there. You just mentioned about having to go to brick and mortar. Now you don't have to. Are you enjoying working from home?
Yeah, I mean, we do and don't. I mean, we have different offices around the country. So
Yeah.
and I'm the owner of the company, primary owner. So it's kind of now to track people down a little bit. So it's a little
Yeah.
difficult, but no, I mean, we understand that. We have a lot of people on mobile anyway. They're virtual anyway. But yeah, it's different. It's definitely, you have to basically stake your space in your home with regards to
Right. Right. Right.
area, and also with regards to, hey, I need this to be quiet for this area.
Yeah. Right before this, I told you, like, hey, I
Yeah.
have to go give the 3-year-old a warning that Daddy's doing Shark Bite Biz because that's how it
Yeah,
is.
I've looked into starting a soundproofing business where you could just
Well,
instantly, soundproof rooms. That'd be just a, gold mine there.
well, if this 5G thing ever falls through, I think there you go. You got
There
a
you
new
go.
business plan.
That's right.
So, a couple other topics that I want to touch on. This is really informative. I just told you a story a couple minutes ago about all the devices that I have hooked up in my house. Now, that's just my house. Think about a business office building. Maybe you have 100 employees there. Well, maybe not now with COVID, but you still probably have a lot of devices connected. Okay.
Right.
How, I guess what I'm trying to ask is, can the 5G infrastructure, does it really have the capability to maintain the business requirements? If tens of millions of people are forced to work from home?
Right now, no. I mean, that's the quick answer. And let me kind of give you a little bit of a kind of a basis for this. Right now in the United States, you have about 400,000 cell towers and rooftop cell sites, give or take
Right.
about 10 or 20,000. You're going to have to build out the before COVID. The forecast was you're going to have to build out by 2025, 2026, 27. You're going to have to build out another million cell sites. Okay. So right now, no, you have the horse is way ahead of the cart in this case. So you got to catch up. You've got to lag. The cart
Right.
needs to catch up to the horse. And so right now, no, because what's happened is this was already something that was needed to maintain the race ahead of the data that was being processed. But now, since you have more people at home, schooling, as we talked about, telehealth and things like that, they've lit a match on the fire, put kerosene on the fire, and now they have to move even faster. So right now, no, it's not. You can't handle it. So that's why there's going to be really a race to get all this built out. And when you see these commercials on TV and you see nationwide 5G, nationwide, I'm not saying they're not being truthful. I'm just saying there's a little asterisk at the bottom of these commercials that everybody needs to read about the maps don't actually indicate where all the 5G is. So people need to understand that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I just saw somebody, I'm not going to mention any names, but I think somebody got in trouble by one of the federal commissions or something for their 5G ads last week, I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, they're trying so hard to promote it for a lot of different reasons, because they have a lot of stake on both ends, on the content side and the service side. Because the big play here for the carriers is not just to provide you the service, but to be able to sell you the content. So think of the example, if people are old enough, you remember when you had the old Kodak cameras and you buy the Kodak camera, and they'd almost give you a camera because they wanted to sell you the film, right? Because the film made them more money. Well, the service, the AT&T service, the Verizon service is that camera. They're trying to not only own the service, they're trying to sell you the content, own the companies that's selling you the content that you use on that phone. So the only way that works is to build out that infrastructure to be able to handle all that.
Do you feel that the wireless industry has become some sort of a commodity? I mean, you look at it back in the 90s, if you were selling wireless service, you all but needed like an engineering degree when you were trying to sell it. And now you look at it, you essentially have teenagers who grew up with the technology, understand it, or young adults that are able to sell it. Everybody has it. Is it a commodity? Should it be a utility? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think there's two different ways. There's actually selling you the device, which is a commodity to me. It's like selling you a game. I mean, it's selling you a computer. And so you have that. The services that is carried over that device is a utility. And like I mentioned before, you have this dependency. And just like turning on the lights, or running water, things of that nature, we become so dependent upon it, it's become a utility. And that's where you get into this little gray area of how you handle this from a oversight of how these companies not only build everything out, but competition as well. Because
Right.
if you get to, as we've diminished the amount of competitors out there when T-Mobile and Sprint merged, you get to a point where you have a smaller amount of companies providing the service, so they control a lot of aspects of that service, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera. So the phone itself, the sale of the phone itself is a commodity. The service, in my mind, is becoming more and more a utility that's necessary for people across the country.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's a lifeline for many, many, many people. So now that we've established that you feel that it's a utility for the service, do you think the federal government should require companies like AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile to set up temporary cell sites, both in rural and urban areas to handle this increased usage with people working from home, with kids studying from home?
Yeah, I think my opinion would be, and I don't think they're going to call me and ask me to mandate it, but if I were giving my opinion, I would say exactly that. I think they need to say, look, if we're allowing you to do X, Y, and Z on a nationwide basis, part of that is basically saying that part of your build out of your infrastructure, you're going to have a certain percentage for certain areas of certain population sizes, because because ultimately it's like any business. Where am I going to spend my money where I get the highest rate of return, right? If I
Right.
just focus on those areas, I'm leaving other areas that basically don't have service or availability to 5G. So you have to go and say, part of this is allowing you, the federal government, part of this is allowing you to build out your network, but also you have to look for the overall community as well. So I think that's
Right.
definitely going to be, I hate to say use the word mandate, but it's going to be part of the deal points.
Right, right, right. Understood. So I've got to ask this out of curiosity then. As far as cellular companies, the way that you feel with the utility section of it, maybe some of those mandates, do you think that, the big telecom companies should still be private companies, or do you think the federal government owes some responsibility to be in charge of rolling this stuff out, or do you think just having the regulations fine?
No, I don't think the federal government should step in and basically control wireless services and things of that nature. I don't think they should take over. I think they should set certain parameters with
Mhm.
regards to, as I said, how it rolls out, how infrastructure is built out. But they also need to have certain. I think one of the big things with the T-Mobile Sprint merger recently is
Mhm.
trying to get another competitor through Dish coming in and trying to get them maybe an easier pathway to build out, so there's not a concentration of control by three big companies. I think that's what they really need to. If you have more competition, I think more competition is really going to drive it. And you may have certain competitors that are focused on rural areas and things of that nature, and have certain subsidies from the federal government
Mhm.
to do that. So I think that's part of it. This is you have to, we work a lot with property owners and negotiate on for our side against the telecom companies.
Right.
This is very much like the oil and gas industry of the turn of
Mhm.
the 20th century. And you think about how
Yeah.
that rolled out. There was this big, turn of the 20th century, these oil companies going out and getting all this land, building out this, profiteering and all this. Eventually, the federal government came in and said, look, we have to protect everyone that deals with this. The people on the back
Mhm.
end that you're selling the oil to, the people that you're leasing the land from, et cetera. So I don't think that it'd be like the federal government taking over the oil and gas industry. I don't think that's advisable. I don't think this is advisable like any other utility.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes absolute perfect sense. With the Sprint T-Mobile merger that you were just talking about, what do you think about that? Do you think the consolidation, Sprint and T-Mobile, is ultimately a good thing for consumers, or if it's replaced by somebody like Dish, or do you think it's going to have some negative effects on the industry?
Short term, I think it'll have a negative impact because there's no way Dish can ramp up and step in the shoes of Sprint. Sprint's going to leave open in the short
Right.
term. Long term, I think it's beneficial because I think Dish will be the issue with Sprint financially. They were on some shaky ground,
Right.
and I think if
Right.
Dish will be in a lot better position than Sprint would have been, let's say, or Sprint would be 5 years from now if they had stayed Sprint by themselves. So I think
Mhm.
you're going to see some short-term pain. I think long-term benefit. I think also, I think you need one more carrier in play. I think you need 5 total. I think just it gets you. I think maybe that's maybe not a nationwide carrier, but have maybe, again, we're talking about the rural areas, maybe some more regional, and then growing into a nationwide carrier. I think that helps out. You have some competition there as well. So
like
there's
a
a lot
U.S.
of different.
Cellular.
Yeah, like a U.S. Cellular. They're kind of, again, they're not, their financials aren't as great as we would think they would be based upon kind of the competition. But if you can get those backed by the government and some incentives there, you can grow that market. There's enough. The industry is huge. They're just, again, it's just, there's some openings for it if you do it the correct way.
Yeah. So with T-Mobile, one of the things that I am surprised about is their previous CEO, John. Basically, I mean, the way that he was able to turn T-Mobile around. I mean, I think that's incredible what he did with T-Mobile, and ultimately how it really drove the industry and brought it, I was thinking for years, it was always, in the telecoms, their interest that they had what they were offering, and that was it. It was take it or leave it. I felt that he kind of turned the tables around with all the stuff that he started doing with T-Mobile. They kind of put it a little bit more on the consumer side of things and make things more consumer friendly, like with the unlimited data and all that other stuff. And, I thought he did an incredible job of turning T-Mobile around over like 5-6 year period.
Well, I mean, my background, as I mentioned earlier, I was inside AT&T for over a decade. And you learn that, and this is meant no disrespect to AT&T, and even Verizon, because Verizon is a spinoff of AT&T, they're like elephants. They have a lot of power. They move very forcefully and very well straight, but they don't move left or right very well. So if you learn how in the industry become nimble, then you can it's like a mouse running around an elephant. The elephant's scared of the mouse, right? Because it's moving too quick. So if you can be nimble and learn, you don't have to be in concrete. Your feet don't have to be in concrete, and you can move left, right, back, forth. Then you find these places where you can find a market share that the other companies aren't focusing on, and you start building upon that, and it builds upon that, and it builds upon that, and that's basically what T-Mobile did. They took the mentality of saying, look, you don't have to do 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do 1, 4, 2, 3. So you can go a different route. And that's what ultimately any good business does. They realize that you don't have to vacillate, but you have to be flexible. And you have to look at what your customer base wants and how to take advantage of that.
The failed merger with AT&T, I believe, helped out a lot too, because it did give them a lot of airwaves around the country that they were able to use for roaming and stuff. But using that, I think they had an opportunity with that they earned, and because of that, they took it away. They ran with it, and it's amazing. I've been with them for about 7 years. I would never consider switching, because they literally went from like the worst customer service to the best customer service. I think they've been great. So now I want to chat about your business. Okay. You have a very interesting business model where you help people lease out property sites for mobile infrastructure, correct?
Correct. So as I mentioned earlier, we've been in business for 10 years, and our backgrounds, people that make up this company, been inside AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile. That's where we come from the legal side, the real estate side, the engineering side. So we cover the 3 big aspects of the business. And we work with property owners. If they've been in contact, you get a phone call, an email, a letter saying, hey, I need to use your property for a cell tower, put equipment on your rooftop, if I'm a municipality, I want to put them on their light poles, things of that nature.
Right.
We work with them when they're engaged. We also work to renegotiate and restructure existing agreements, because the big thing out there from the property owner's perspective, whether you be an individual or you be a Fortune 500 company that's leasing space on your buildings, is they don't understand they're playing the wrong game. I'll use the analogy of these companies and these individuals are really good baseball players, but AT&T, Verizon are asking them to play football. Some of the skill set transfers, but it's not the same game. So you'll never win. We work to basically negotiate the best overall value for the for the use of their property, to put the best structure in place going forward. So they not only leasing space, but leasing utility. So they're paid based upon that, and also protect the property as well, because property owners get themselves in some really bad situations because they chase that what called found money for leasing space on their property, and they don't understand how much money they're leaving on the table. The average lease, cell site lease, leaves over $1 million on the table. $1 million. We, and on existing leases, our average increase immediately in revenue being produced for our clients is over 300%. Think about that. Where do you get 300%? Because we understand how to look at this from a utility perspective and not a real estate perspective. You're not leasing space, you're leasing utility.
Wow, that's a lot of money on the table. So how does someone, like, say you have a property, you're like, hey, I think this would be great. I mean, how does that whole process of site selection actually start?
Well, that's one of the things. We get contacted probably 300 to 500 times a week by property owners saying, I have a great location, I have this property, et cetera, et cetera. And there's three levels of kind of the property owners. There is the individual that says, I have this property, here in Atlanta, Georgia, or in Las Vegas or wherever, and I think it'd be a great location for a cell tower. Well, you can't go to an AT&T, Verizon and say, have this great location, you need to build something here. They don't build a location and work their network around location. They find a location that works their network build out plan. So that's really a road that people shouldn't travel too far on, trying to track that down. So we tell people don't do that. So let's say you own like 10 commercial properties. Then you can possibly contact the tower companies and the wireless carriers and say, hey, I have these properties open, and they put it in their database, and there may be an opportunity there. The third is, if you're a large corporation that has hundreds of properties across the United States, then you can enter some master agreements with these carriers, and then you can possibly be in a situation of lease your property. But there's no way to go out and say, I have a property, AT&T, please use it, and they just connect and call them and they start wanting to use your property. What happens is they contact you. They send you a letter, they give you a phone call, et cetera.
Shucks, there goes my shot.
Well, but here's the silver lining. As I mentioned earlier, there's about 400,000 cell sites right now. There's 1 million that's going to need to be built. So think about that. So you're going to have an opportunity there's going to be the odds are long, but they're going to get shorter. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to get something on their property, but you're continuing to have to build out the infrastructure, because what you need is densification of the network. So you just need to get more and more sites. So does that mean your odds went up? Yes, your odds are still very long on getting something on your property. But what you need to know is, once you get that phone call, once you get that letter, is to make the best of that opportunity.
So I don't know if you can disclose this or not, but give us an idea. I mean, if you do get one on your property, I mean, what's kind of like an average contract look like?
Well, just kind of give you a general, what you're looking at an agreement that's going to be for between 25 to 30 years. That's what they're going to want you to commit to. What people contact a lot about and say, hey, I'm in Los Angeles, or I'm in Atlanta, or I'm in Chicago, or I'm in Topeka, Kansas, or wherever. And they say, what is the market rate for a cell tower here? And there's no such thing as a market rate. You have to look at each individual situation. It's like saying, what is the value of an oil well, right? Yeah. It's like how much production is being generated, right? You can have 10 oil wells within 5 miles of each other. They all have different values. That's how these companies value it on the other side. So, but you're looking at the value of a typical cell site lease over the life of it, over those 30 years, can range from the hundreds of thousands of dollars up to the low million. And then, but in general, what's happening, but here's the problem. If I come out to you, and let's say I'm a tower company, and I say to you, I'm going to offer you, just throw out a number, $2,000 a month, a 3% escalator, and I want a 30-year term, right? Yeah. So, and I want to put my cell tower out there. Well, now what have they done? They've got you to fix their cost, because no matter how valuable that site becomes, all they're paying you is $2,000, 3% escalator over the next 30 years. So if I came to you and I said, look, I'm from Exxon, I want to put an oil well on your property. I'm going to offer you $2,000 a month, 3% escalator, and for the next 30 years, I get to keep all the oil. Your first question would be, how much oil are you going to have, right? So you think of this as, again, not structuring based upon rent, but structuring based upon value being derived. And that's where people make the mistake, is they think about rent and don't think about overall structure. This is a utility agreement and not a real estate agreement, even though you're leasing space.
Wow, that's really great because it goes back to the discussion that we were having generally about the wireless industry being a utility. Here we are, on the infrastructure side, and we're talking about it as a utility. This
Right.
was awesome.
Yeah, it is. It's way. I mean, we get to try to people to play the right game. Again, they're playing the wrong game. Our first discussion with people is very simple. Don't worry about what you've been offered from an AT&T, Verizon, whoever. Understand what you're offering them. Simple. It's just the difficulty of this is people are unfamiliar with the industry. Our job is to get them more familiar with the industry and thinking a bigger picture than just think about rent.
Wow. Hey, Hugh, this was an amazing, amazing interview. Thank you. It's been very informative. I've learned a lot of things talking with you today. Do us a favor, all our viewers, listeners out there, how can they get in contact with you?
Well, the easiest way is to go to our website, which is celltowerleaseexperts.com. Again, that's celltowerleaseexperts.com. You can contact us. Our phone numbers are there and email addresses as well.
Perfect. Thank you again, Hugh, for coming on Shark Bite Biz. And I'm looking forward to getting you back some point next year.
Thank you so much. We appreciate the opportunity.
Yep. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you.
Wow. That discussion with Hugh, it was lit. I mean, wasn't it? And you get better than that. It's my two favorite worlds, leading edge tech and business. Absolutely loved it. So first, before I get to the episode summary, if you enjoyed this interview, do me a solid, please. This is David Strausser, host of Shark Bite Biz, asking you all to do me a favor. Subscribe. Doesn't matter where you're at, okay? Smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Deezer, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon's Audible, wherever you're at, smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, give us a 5-star rating. The point is, we're trying to get this out there so that more and more people can hear these great stories like we just talked about with Hugh, to help them break through barriers that are preventing growth, to help them get educated so that way they can grow both professionally and personally. So share this episode out to your whole network. Doesn't matter where you're at, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, any of the other, social medias out there. Let's just get Shark Bite Biz trending on social media. That's my goal. Use hashtag Shark Bite Biz. Let's get it out there. Tag us and let's build this community together. Now let's get back to Hugh, okay? Seriously, it was a great interview. It was extremely informative. It's amazing how mobile networks, whether it's 5G or even satellite with Elon Musk Starlink, they're providing emergency services to areas that normally would not have internet at all. They did that during the hurricane. They did it during the California wildfires. This is bleeding edge technology, and it is going to change how things are done in the future because we can rapidly deploy service so that people can communicate, whereas just a year ago, that wasn't possible. If the fires knock out service to a specific area in California, guess what? I mean, they have radios if it's getting service and it's picking up signal, and that's about it. So this is a huge, huge breakthrough for businesses, for security, for everything. And I just wish that it could get deployed even faster. He gave us some really great insight, though, too, about just some comparisons with how the cell tower industry is now like the oil business was maybe about 100 years ago or so. And it is really insane with how much money you can get for leasing your property for a cell tower. Like Hugh said, though, I mean, it's all about how strategic your site is and how much demand there is for the tower. If you are lucky enough to have a prized location, you could be rolling in the dough like Scrooge McDuck on top of all those billions of coins that he had in there. But for most people, I mean, it just really depends. How strategic is the site? So that's where somebody like Hugh's company is really able to help you all out. Lastly, I really did enjoy the capacity discussion that we had with Hugh, because not only, okay, so you've got to go back. Okay, think about this. We had a discussion as far as coverage and the signal reach, but if your signal reaches, but there's not enough bandwidth or capacity to handle all the data requests, you have just as big as a problem as if the signal doesn't reach out there too. And that's really where 5G is going to change things. It is going to expand how much we can use the internet, and it will be able to handle both businesses and consumers alike, especially during the pandemic with their increased data needs. So think about it. Instead of having maybe like a 10-minute meeting inside of a cubicle last year in your office, you're now pretty much forced to do a Microsoft Teams call, or maybe it's a Zoom call or a Skype call. So you went from essentially zero data usage to have that 10-minute meeting to maybe a couple of 100 megs to maybe a gigabyte or two of data usage. Now multiply that extra data usage by every single American in the United States, and that's a huge amount of data increase that just happened in 2020. But according to Hugh, with the capacity of 5Gs, we're going to be in good shape. It really comes down to like what Hugh was saying, where think about the interstate highway that was 4 lanes, and now the Department of Transportation is expanding it to 20 lanes. Yeah, that's probably an exaggeration for a United States highways, but you get it, because you're going to be increasing by that much the lanes of information that's able to be processed. And that's where 5G is really going to allow these mobile providers to handle the increased use requirements, both residential and business, commercial use, with ease. Both T-Mobile and Verizon are starting to offer home internet service based off of 5G, just as proof that this is actually something that will work. 5G is a game changer in terms of business and personal communications and being connected. So basically, with them offering the home 5G, you're skipping the traditional ISP, internet service provider, offering, and you're going straight to wireless, and you're going to have 5G broadband in your house connected to a router that everybody's able to connect to. Basically the same thing you have right now, just that instead of it being connected to the phone wire or cable, it's going to have a little SIM card in there, and it's bringing in the 5G service from whoever that provider is. Anyways, thank you again to Hugh Odom. This was an amazing show, and I've got to ask everybody out there watching, do you want to be a guest on the show? Do you have an amazing business story you want to tell me that you want to get out to the world? Are you a subject matter expert that want to talk about how your clients pivoted during the pandemic? Shoot me an email, david@sharkbitebiz.com. Once again, I'm David Strausser. This is Shark Bite Biz, and we'll see you again next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to Shark Bite Biz. We hope you got some insightful info from this podcast. Be sure to subscribe to us through your favorite podcast app and visit us on the web at www.sharkbitebiz.com. How has business changed for you in the 20s? Email us at podcast@sharkbitebiz.com so you can join us and share your story.